Okay, we are live. At least I think we're live. Welcome to part 3. And technically, this is a part of a series where we're looking up all 1,500 names in Epstein's Little Black Book, which is a Rolodex of all of Epstein's closest associates. And this series of live streams is the only place on the internet looking up all 1,500 names live on air. But that's not going to be the focus of this stream. We're going to keep looking up some names, but first I have an exclusive for you guys. This is something that no one is talking about. It's a rabbit hole I fell down that connects Epstein to the U.S. State Department and the U.S. military and the CIA through a private military contractor. A military contractor who was also caught trafficking women and children at the same time as Epstein. And this is an exclusive bombshell that you guys are not going to hear anywhere else. So make sure to stick around until the end and smack that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. This military contractor connected to Epstein that was caught trafficking women and children at the same time as him is called Dine Corp. Dine Corp is a military and CIA and government contractor with active U.S. contracts still to this day under the parent company Amentum. So DynCorp or Amentum is way bigger than Palantir. The Palantir revenue is about $5 billion annually, and DynCorp does about $10 billion annually, so like double. And the company DynCorp has had its hand in everything since the 1940s. Intelligence training, data processing, electronic warfare, counter narcotics operations, aviation, logistics, military work with big pharma, a lot of stuff. And working for the U.S. and dozens of countries around the world, government and commercial. And as mentioned about DynCorp, connected to Epstein, they were caught trafficking women and children at the same time as Epstein in the early 2000s. So the highlighted information is the registration of a State Department / U.S. military aircraft that was leased to DynCorp and listed as flying from Epstein's private airstrip in New Mexico to an Albuquerque airport. The tail number of this aircraft was listed right under a couple of Lolita Express entries. Yet no one is talking about this. This is the connection between Epstein and the CIA and U.S. military and the U.S. State Department. DynCorp and the flight from Epstein's private Zorro airstrip. The same Zorro ranch documented as being part of Epstein's trafficking operation. And this is in the official flight logs that everybody knows the Lolita Express from. And this wasn't just some typo. This was registered as an official flight by the FAA as having took place. And we're going to go over all the documents right now. First, we're going to go into some history of DynCorp, this private military contractor associated with Epstein through these flight logs. On top of being caught for human trafficking on multiple occasions, DynCorp was also involved in the narcotics operation in Afghanistan following the U.S. invasion. They were also involved in Colombia as well. Let's go ahead and switch this over so you can see what I'm talking about here. So here are some pictures of DynCorp employees in the opium fields of Afghanistan. Just patrolling a field of heroin, that's all. And while these pictures were allegedly documenting, quote, opium eradication, end quote, Afghanistan became the world's largest producer of opium by the mid-2000s. 90% of the global supply. Pretty much produced all the world's heroin during the entire U.S. occupation. And I'm not trying to spend a lot of time on this. I just wanted to mention it to show that DynCorp was involved in the Afghanistan narcotics operations, mainly because their Colombia narcotics operations are central to the story of this Epstein-connected aircraft, as you'll see here in a second. Now, there's plenty of documentation on the surge of opium in the Afghanistan war. The UN documented on this. It's been documented that the U.S. was turning a blind eye to the opium production to win the hearts and minds of the citizens, despite the Afghanistani government wanting the crops destroyed. Like I said, only wanted to mention this because DynCorp was involved. Here's a few sources. If you wanted to find out more about this, U.S. counterinsurgency in Afghanistan. You can always check out my book, The Political Military Complex. I'll leave the links to all information down in the comments below or in the description below. In the description, they don't really let me post clickable links, so I'll probably end up leaving it in the comments. Okay, back to Epstein's connections to the human trafficking activities of DynCorp. First, I'm going to play this congressional video where a senator from the state of Georgia was questioning Donald Rumsfeld in 2006 about DynCorp, wondering how DynCorp managed to keep getting military and State Department contracts despite having been caught numerous times for human trafficking. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Gentleman, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McKinney.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I watched President Bush deliver a moving speech at the United Nations in September 2003, in which he mentioned the crisis of the sex trade. The president called for the punishment of those involved in this horrible business. But at the very moment of that speech, DynCorp was exposed for having been involved in the buying and selling of young women and children. While all of this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccines and is now working on a plague vaccine through the Joint Vaccine Acquisition Program. Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls? That's my first question. My second question, Mr. Secretary, according to the Comptroller General of the United States, there are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon, to which Mr. Cooper alluded. Fiscal year 1999, 2.3 trillion missing. Fiscal year 2000, 1.1 trillion missing. And DOD is the #1 reason why the government can't balance its checkbook. The Pentagon has claimed year after year that the reason it can't account for the money is because its computers don't communicate with each other. My second question, Mr. Secretary, is who has the contracts today to make those systems communicate with each other? How long have they had those contracts? And how much have the taxpayers paid for them? Finally, Mr. Secretary, after the last hearing, I thought that my office was promised a written response to my question regarding the 4 war games on September 11th. I have not yet received that response, but would like for you to respond to the questions that I've put to you today, and then I do expect the written response to my previous question, hopefully by the end of the week.
Thank you, Representative. First, the answer to your first question is no, absolutely not. The policy of the United States government is clear, unambiguous, and opposed to the activities that you described. The second question.
Well, how do you explain the fact that DynCorp and its successor companies have received and continue to receive government contracts?
I would have to go and find the facts, but there are laws and rules and regulations with respect to government contracts. And there are times that corporations do things they should not do, in which case they tend to be suspended for some period. There are times then that under the laws and the rules and regulations that passed by the Congress and implemented by the executive branch, that corporations can get off of out of the penalty box, if you will, and be permitted to engage in contracts with the government. They're not generally not barred in perpetuity.
This company was never in the penalty box. If you could proceed to my second question, please.
On your first question, I'm advised by Dr. Chu that it was not the corporation that was engaged in the activities you characterized, but I'm told it was an employee of the corporation, and it was some years ago in the Balkans that took place.
It's my understanding that it continues to take place, and
is that right?
Yes.
Well, if you can give me information to that effect,
I'm sure you are interested in all of the information that I have, and I'll be more than happy to provide it to you.
Good, thank you.
So, pretty shady shit. So, DynCorp started out in the 1940s, and it was primarily in the field of aviation, working for the military and U.S. State Department. And since then, they've pretty much moved into everything all around the world, working for governments and militaries, now under the umbrella of Amentum, doing training for intelligence agencies, flying goods and materials around the world, etc. And this congressional video is from 2006, with the senator questioning Donald Rumsfeld. But as you're going to see, not much has really changed as far as oversight and holding these companies accountable, these private military contractors accountable for trafficking women and children. All right, so let's see here. And as mentioned, DynCorp is connected to Epstein through the flight logs. What? Why didn't we hear about this? Exactly my point. Why didn't we hear about this? The entire focus of Epstein's flight log has been on his Lolita Express aircraft and the celebrities on board. There's been absolutely zero focus or even mention of a State Department aircraft leased to a military and intelligence contractor tied to the CIA on these flight logs, who was also trafficking women and children at the same time. And you guys heard it here first. I'm going to show you all the documents right now. First, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And strap in, because we're about to get deep down this rabbit hole here. Don't forget to check out the bookstore. Don't forget to check out the bookstore. Running deals offering free shipping. And there's a little something in there for everyone. Mind control experiments, eugenics, artificial intelligence, psyops. So make sure to grab one for your collection. And definitely tune into my periodical over on Medium. It's completely free, no paywall. More than welcome to stop by at any time. I'll leave all the links to everything down below. Your interest in these topics really means a lot. So, Epstein's personal pilots were subpoenaed back in 2019. David Rogers and Larry Visowski. This was flight logs, passenger manifests, pilot logs, everything and anything. So there's one very important distinction that we got to make here. So this is between flight logs and pilot logs. A flight log is the operational record for one specific aircraft. Okay, it shows where one specific aircraft and where they were going and when. A pilot log is kept by a pilot containing multiple aircraft. And this is used for billing clients, not just regulation. It's used when a pilot has to say, okay, I flew you around for 50 hours this month. You owe me X amount of dollars on multiple aircraft. And if you don't believe me, here's my pilot log. So it shows all the different aircraft tied to a client. It might not even be the client's own plane. It might be a friend or associate of a client. The guy might tell his pilot, hey, look, my partner's pilot is out sick today, and we need you to fly his plane. So the pilot's obviously getting paid for those hours, so he logs these hours in the book. It's not the client's plane, but it's still in the pilot's log for that particular client. Now, this is the subpoena of Epstein's pilots. It's actually the second time they've been subpoenaed. This is the record of all of his flights, and this is where we know the Lolita Express from. So this is page 11 of David Rogers' pilot log for Epstein from back in 2009. This is a bit more detailed than a pilot's log. It's actually more of a manifest because it shows the passengers as well. This is where, like I said, we know the Lolita Express from. The Lolita Express registration number is N909JE. But it also has a bunch of other aircraft as well that nobody seems to pay attention to. And it's hundreds of pages of logs and manifests that were first learned of, like I said, the Lolita Express and celebrities going to Epstein's St. James Islands was during a court session in the early 2000s that was a civil suit with all of the victims. And this is where this got disclosed. Hundreds of pages. So it seems very strange that the hyper-focus has been on the Lolita Express, especially because of all the other aircraft. Like this one here. That highlighted section there, and this is on page 11. I'm going to leave everything down in the comments or the descriptions, all of the sources. But this highlighted section here shows an aircraft registered to the U.S. State Department and leased to Dine Corp, registration N474AW, listed next to the model of Epstein's aircraft on Epstein's manifest. Why hasn't this been talked about? I don't know. And probably for the same reason that everyone is hyper-focused on the Lolita Express. This is a State Department registration leased to Dine Corp that wasn't deregistered until 2010. And this particular Epstein flight was from 2002. And these documents were submitted in 2009 with that civil suit I was talking about. So this State Department registration was still active for a whole year after the Lolita Express was first exposed. Registered to the U.S. State Department from 1997 to 2010 and leased to Dine Corp. And this is on Epstein's flight manifest. Right below Epstein's Lolita Express. Tail number N908JE. You can't make this up. N909JE. You really can't make this up. Why hasn't anybody talked about this? I don't know. If you didn't hear first, this is definitely going to be the deepest dive on this information that currently exists. Prove me wrong. Put it in the comments. And there's a lot to unpack with the State Department registration. And we're going to get into the weeds of all this later on in the live stream. So this particular Epstein Dine Corp flight was going from Epstein's New Mexico Zorro Ranch to the Double Eagle 2 airport. And this is Epstein's New Mexico Zorro Ranch with its own private airstrip and helipad. And this was considered by the courts to having been central to his human trafficking operation. It's official. And there has been zero discussion on this State Department Dine Corp flight from this private airstrip owned by Epstein. Zero discussion. Until now. And a big question is, if the State Department Dine Corp registration was flying out of Epstein's private airstrip, they had to fly in there, right? And why wasn't David Rogers and Larry Wasowski, who flew it in? I mean, what about Epstein's other pilots who conveniently weren't even subpoenaed? Like Nadia Morsinkovich, as she is formerly known as being Epstein's pilot, one of Epstein's pilots. We brought this up in previous live streams. Why wasn't she subpoenaed, and where her flight manifests? I mean, she was a regular pilot. I'm gonna bring up this video really fast of Nadia Morsinko that we played. As you can see here, inside of her wiki. First, I'm just gonna bring up her wiki really fast because it cited plenty of sources about her being one of Epstein's pilots, and she was never subpoenaed for all of her flight logs, unlike Epstein's other two pilots here. She was the Gulfstream girl, quote unquote. So she was a long-term assistant to Jeffrey Epstein and was a regular pilot of Epstein's on the Lolita Express. This is the sourced by The Guardian, and it was sourced by Wired. The Daily Telegraph reported that Morsinko, during questioning regarding alleged underage sexual activities, had, quote, invoked her right to not incriminate herself, protected by the U.S. Constitution's Fifth Amendment. So she pled the Fifth. And she was exposed in the Miami Herald 70 times when he was in Palm Beach custody. She had visited Jeffrey Epstein, and she actually went to him after he was released for his first time being charged. In Miami Herald was actually the very first person that disclosed the non-prosecution agreement that forever prevented anyone from going after Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators. So I'm going to play this video of Nadia Marcinko really fast, just so you guys can see. So you guys can see what she looks like, who she was. We brought her up in a previous stream, so if you guys want to check that out, go ahead and check out part 2 and part 1. And sorry guys, technical difficulties. I'm looking for this video. This one actually might have been in part 1. It wasn't in part 2. It was in part 1. Yeah, we brought this one up in part 1. All of the other pilots that got away, that never got subpoenaed, never got questioned. All the other Epstein pilots. So let's go ahead and pull that up right now. Right here.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
All the other assistants. All the other groomers. So you can see right there, over on the left side, is Nadia Marcinko, Nadia Marcinkovich. Let's see if I can go ahead and rewind this a little bit. Just one of many assistants of Jeffrey Epstein's that went unquestioned. So let's go ahead and move on. So, before we get into this State Department and DynCorp registration, we're going to go into DynCorp's role in trafficking women and children, and the deliberate stand down from doing anything about it by the U.S. military, the Pentagon, United Nations, etc. And these are not my words. These are the words of the U.S. Congress and whistleblowers straight out of their mouths. And we're about to go over all the documents. First, I want to play this video from the first time DynCorp was exposed for human trafficking. This was made public by a woman named Catherine Bolkovac. And they actually made a movie about her called The Whistleblower. So let's go ahead and check out what she had to say. Her expose. The first time DynCorp was caught for human trafficking. Let me try to pull this up here. Like I said, her name was Catherine Bolkovac. This is the first person to expose DynCorp for human trafficking. The same company that's connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Alright, let's go ahead and take a listen.
During my 10 years as a police investigator, I specialized in child sex crimes and domestic violence. I was no stranger to evildoers and violence being perpetrated against women and children. In 1999, I would be heading off to Bosnia as an international police force task member. I certainly never expected to be terminated less than 2 years later and find myself in a foreign country fighting to save my reputation as a police officer and defend my integrity and honesty against a multi-billion-dollar United States private government contractor. I became aware of rape tapes being distributed by the Department of Defense contractors on military bases. I worked with Bosnian law enforcement officers who put their lives and jobs on the line when they reported cases of military and UN officials participating in the transport of young girls across international borders. Then I documented my findings in an email to mission officials in an attempt to educate and raise the awareness of the issue internally. I was immediately accused of being burned out, demoted, and then terminated a few months later as a final act of the United Nations and private contractor retaliation against me.
I was working this story, trying to extend my story. I mean, we broke the story, and it didn't go anywhere. It did not get any traction. I mean, I talked to Colin Lynch. I asked Colin Lynch to do more stories on it, and I could not, and Madeline was working on it, Martina Vandenberg, we were all working on it. We could not. Martina puts out this report, and Human Rights Watch generally enjoys considerably good press coverage once they put out a report. Nobody was interested. It just didn't matter. And that's why they didn't cover it. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal, in the business pages, very small mention that DynCorp, that's where Dr. Vance was asking me, that's where I saw the report that DynCorp was in trouble on gun trafficking in Latin America and was in the business section on DynCorp.
And I think if you start researching many of these government contractors, especially DynCorp, you will see just how deep the tentacles go into our government. They are, operating the Pentagon. They're operating our international security systems. They're operating our airports. I mean, just, it goes on and on.
It goes on and on, she says. And then after this Bosnia operation, this happened in the early 2000s. An airplane mechanic named Ben Johnson sued DynCorp, saying he was fired because he had uncovered evidence that DynCorp employees were involved in, quote, sexual slavery, end quote. Again, with girls as young as 12 years old. So, this is Ben Johnson's story, and it was really hard trying to find all of these articles, by the way. I really want to let you guys know, because a lot of this has kind of just been scrubbed from the internet. I had to go back into the Wayback Machine, into different archives to be able to find all of this stuff for you guys. Johnson reports that he had been in Bosnia only a few days, and he became aware of misbehavior in which DynCorp colleagues were involved. I really want you guys to check this out. I'm going to put all of these links in the description. He said none of the girls were from Bosnia. They were from Russia, Romanian girls, and other places. And I actually want to let you guys know that I didn't read this full article, but this definitely coincides with other research that I've done, is that this was, all of the girls were from Eastern Europe, so they wouldn't even have been from Bosnia. So, according to the whistleblower that you heard, or no, excuse me, this is according to Ben Johnson, a different whistleblower. But Catherine, the previous whistleblower, she said the exact same thing. She said all these girls are from Eastern Europe. So, this is from a different whistleblower. And all of these documents came from a lawsuit that Ben Johnson had filed against DynCorp, saying he had been canned because he exposed all this. On June 2nd, 2000, members of the 48th Military Police Detachment conducted a sting on the DynCorp hangar, one of the two bases, and all of the DynCorp personnel were detained for questioning. Let me see if I could find. There was a couple other quotes I wanted to find in here and show you guys. One time he fell asleep with a torch in his hand. All right, so this is a DynCorp employee in Bosnia who fell asleep with a torch in his hand and burned a hole through the plastic on the aircraft. The same man, according to Johnson, owned a girl who couldn't have been more than 14 years old. He said it's, quote, it's sick anyway to see any grown man having sex with a child, but to see some 45-year-old man who weighs 400 pounds with a little girl, it just makes you sick, end quote. So he said it's precisely these allegations that got him fired, and this led to a lawsuit because he got canned for bringing this up. Let's see what other articles we got here. There was a few articles about this. A lot of people were reporting on this. And then you had, again, after this incident. So first you had the Bosnia incident. And then you had the incident with Ben Johnson. And then for the third time, in October 2004, it was revealed that DynCorp contract workers operating in Tolmedia Air Base in Colombia distributed a video in which they could be observed sexually violating underage girls in the town of Melgar. It was sold on the streets. According to follow-up work, basically the girl ended up taking her own life. So this is now the third time that DynCorp was involved in Colombia. And keep in mind Colombia, because this aircraft that's associated with Epstein from DynCorp, who was a CIA contractor, a military contractor, did work in Colombia that was not far from Melgar. Not far from Melgar. So keep that in mind. And let's see here. So this is another incident. This is now the fourth incident that DynCorp was involved in with human trafficking. And this was when DynCorp hired young children in Afghanistan to do a tribal ceremony known as bazi. And we're going to get into this because this is very unsettling. And the Washington Post was the very first person to report on this, and this got scrubbed from the internet, and it was pretty hard to find this article. It was very hard to find this article, actually. DynCorp employees basically hired children to do to do exotic dances for people that weren't even from Afghanistan. And this is apparently a cultural thing in Afghanistan because women, because of laws, women aren't allowed to do exotic dances. So basically they hire these children to do these exotic dances, and it ends up leading to sexual assault, and it's a very tragic situation. And basically DynCorp employees hired one of these children to do these dances for people, and they videotaped it. And Washington Post was the very first to report on this. And I'm gonna play something about bazi because you guys should know. That way, you know, you guys should know exactly what bazi is, and because when you realize that DynCorp hired these people, it's just very, very. It's a whole unsettling situation. I'm gonna play this video right now. It's honestly really upsetting just even thinking about it, but I'm gonna play this video really fast. And as you guys can see on the screen, again, team leader died of heroin overdose. I'm gonna go ahead and play this video so you guys know what bazi is, so you know what DynCorp was involved in.
A private party is underway in Kabul. In Afghanistan, women are not allowed to dance in public, so boys are dressed as girls and made to perform. The ancient practice of bazi, or dancing boys, is widespread, involving orphans or boys from poor families as young as 10 years old. They are often sexually abused and raped. One of the boys came to our Kabul office and showed us how he dances. Abdul, who didn't give his real name, performs at weddings and parties.
I used to work as a street trader. When I saw the money which dancers got, I stopped working on the streets. I was really happy when I started getting this kind of money. It was a lot. I started dancing because of my family's bad financial situation.
This footage from YouTube shows boys performing with fake breasts and bells around their ankles. Men give the dancers money. Some boys are tempted by high earnings, but others are abducted.
They forced me into their car and took me for a ride. They forced me to dance for them. They took me to a village. One time, 2 men had sex with me. Another time, 1 man did.
Faisal danced for 2 years before he turned 18, when most dancing boys are considered men and tossed aside.
I will never forget what these people did to me as long as I live. I've lost my mind. I'm biting my nails all the time. I have psychological problems.
The practice of bazi has spread since the fall of the Taliban, who declared it un-Islamic. In Afghanistan today, it is still illegal. But the ban often goes unenforced. Warlords dominate large areas of the country, and the practice has now spread from the countryside to big cities, including Kabul.
This is child trafficking. The boys are abducted and taken from one province to another. The children are kept in the company of powerful armed commanders and forced to become dancing boys.
Another issue preventing action against the practice is police complicity. This YouTube video shows an Afghan policeman apparently enjoying himself at a show. Dancers say it's not unusual.
The police don't ask why we're doing it, but they threaten to arrest us. Many times they've demanded we dance and have sex with them or give them money.
There are countless videos like this on the internet. As long as there is extreme poverty and the rule of law remains weak in Afghanistan, the practice of bazi is unlikely to disappear.
Yeah, so that was what DynCorp was involved in. DynCorp hired Afghani boys to do these bazi dances to non-Afghani audiences and then videotaped it. And this was revealed by the Washington Post after it was already revealed that DynCorp was trafficking children in Bosnia and selling recordings of sexual assault in Colombia. So this Washington Post article is now starting to show a pattern with DynCorp. Really nothing new. And the story about DynCorp hiring Afghani children for exotic dances apparently caused a stir within the ranks because Afghanistan's interior minister contacted the U.S. Embassy to quash the story. See if I could find that there. which is exactly what happened. And I had to really dig for this Washington Post article, this Guardian article, that exposed this, all of this with Dine Corp. Well, the Washington Post article was scrubbed. The Guardian reported on this WikiLeaks article that exposed that the Interior Minister was trying to quash that story that the Washington Post published. And that's exactly the reason why I had to go digging for it. And the WikiLeaks posted because the whole reason why all of this got scrubbed from the internet is because Afghanistan's Interior Minister. So this is a total of 4 instances where DynCorp had been involved in the trafficking of women and children. Everybody posted on it. CBS News posted on it. This website actually spelled DynCorp wrong. Everybody with bazi. So even after all of these instances of human trafficking exposed, the government and military still just could not suppress human trafficking by its contractors by 2010. As you can see here, the exploitation of persons in contingency contracting remains a serious problem in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's from an oversight report. At many times during its travels and hearings, the Commission uncovered tragic evidence of the recruitment problem of trafficking in persons by contractors and subcontractors. Here we are again. We got the final report of the Commission on Wartime Contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan from 2011. This is a year later. And Representative Richard Blumenthal on human trafficking says that there was no suspensions or debarments related to cases of human trafficking by the Navy, Air Force, or Defense Logistics Agency. So nothing was being done about any of this. Nothing was being done. And again, we have here, and this is in 2012, they have to make an end trafficking in government and contracting act because it was so bad. They just could not get human trafficking under control within the ranks. And then we have here, and this is one hell of a headline, quote, U.S. military budget paying for human trafficking violations and abuses, end quote. Is this being hyperbolic? 4 strikes by the State Department's largest contractor. And the military and Congress just still can't get this under control. And the Pentagon is trying, at one time, was trying to block any independent reporting on this trafficking within its own ranks. So, now that we've heard it from Congress and whistleblowers and the media, let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Let's hear it from someone with boots on the ground who was actually in the midst of these conflict zones. How exactly did the military tell its soldiers to view human trafficking in these conflict zones where DynCorp was working? Let's take a listen. There we go. All right, let's take a listen.
So what kind of stuff did you see, and what, how are American soldiers processing this as they're becoming aware of what's going on?
I mean, most guys were just disgusted and had lost all respect for, any Afghan leader that we met. Like the Afghan police chiefs, one of them in particular had like maybe a 10-year-old boy that he would like show off to other leaders that would come out. And I didn't witness this myself, but like the interpreters would tell us they could like rent the boy out for all male parties and stuff. And they would like dance and perform. And then the guys would have sex with the boy, and like I said, we literally caught, adult men trying to, force themselves on boys and stopped them. And we're not supposed to do that, though. We're not supposed to interfere in their culture. There was a Green Beret that they tried to kick out of the Army because he stopped the rape of a boy. He eventually fought it and overturned it and stayed in the Army. But that's how opposed to us doing anything the United States Army was. And sometimes a family that was really poor would sell like a son into this practice. And we seen a boy being taken from his home, like the dad was giving the boy to another male, and the mom came out without her mask on, like sobbing, trying to stop him. And you got to understand, we never saw the women in like rural Afghanistan. So she was like practically risking her life to save her son. They just took her back inside and ended up sending the boy out. And I asked the interpreter, I was like, what is going on here? And he's like, oh, they're selling this boy, they call it like bazi or baza, like boy play, selling him into this practice. And
Wow.
like guys just couldn't wrap their heads around it. It's just so foreign that that's like a normal thing, for them to do.
So they were instructed not to do anything about it. And government and military contractors were essentially partaking in it. And after all this unfolded, there hasn't really been a peep about it. So not sure if really anything changed. Doesn't look good. Not a good look. So now that we've covered DynCorp's role in multiple instances, 4 instances of trafficking women and children throughout the decades, let's get into this DynCorp aircraft owned by the State Department and used by Epstein. Here is the State Department aircraft that was on Epstein's manifest, used for narcotics missions in Colombia, spraying glyphosate on top of crops of drugs. Here you can see that it was registered in 1997 and wasn't deregistered until 2010. And here you can see that the same State Department aircraft is on Epstein's flight manifest underneath the Lolita Express. Why this hasn't been talked about, I don't know. But you heard it here first, folks. Some might say, well, even though it's on Epstein's flight manifest, this hasn't been recognized by anyone except you, so it's not real. But I gotta show you something here. Well, although this has been underreported, I'm not the only one who has documented this. Business Insider compiled a searchable list of all of Epstein's flights from his logs and manifests. And here you can see right there the State Department's N474AW. You can look all this up yourself. Is there right there in their searchable database. Going from Epstein's private airstrip in his Zorro Ranch that has been documented as being a part of his trafficking operations to an Albuquerque airport. As you guys can see there, let me go back to the flight logs. As you guys can see, N474AW. Go back to the flight logs. N474AW. That is a State Department aircraft. That is actually a military aircraft, and it was leased to Dine Corp, a military contractor that is contracted by the CIA as well. I'd love some more eyes on this, so go ahead and fact check me. So far, I've heard this mentioned briefly, but I'm the only person on the internet that has gone this deep into the State Department aircraft on Epstein's flight manifest. So there you guys can see right there. This is when it was deregistered. It's registered to the State Department. United States Department of State. This is N474AW. N474AW. So the State Department. FAA registry. Going from Epstein's private airstrip on his Zorro Ranch to the Double Eagle 2 airport in Albuquerque. Double Eagle is a private airport, but it also supports military flights as well. And it's only 15 miles from Kirtland Air Force Base. And this is just interesting to know, considering the military operations that this DOS registration is tied to. The State Department registration. Another interesting part about this flight is that, unlike the other ones, it does not include the flight number, the passengers, nothing. And this might seem strange for public flights, but this is nothing new. It's very common for military and intelligence flights to withhold this information for OPSEC, operational security. And this is done for a bunch of reasons, including transferring passengers whose identity they might want to keep secret and off the record. So, who was on this State Department flight from Epstein's ranch associated with human trafficking? We don't know. But people really need to be asking these questions. So make sure to share this live stream everywhere you can. There's also evidence that the State Department registration leased by DynCorp may have been spoofed. What is spoofing? Aircraft spoofing is when false flight information is given to disguise an aircraft's true identity or location. As you guys are going to see in a second, because this flight was from 2002, and actually this registration was from an aircraft, a military aircraft that crashed in the year 2000. So it's likely that this aircraft was spoofed. It had the transponder on board, and it changed the tail number to where the FAA actually picked up a different tail number than what the aircraft was. Because there is no registration of model number 206L3, as you can see here on this flight manifest, with this registration number. So we're going to talk more about spoofing in a bit, but just know that it's more common for military and intelligence to disguise themselves as civilian aircraft to blend in. So if this was a spoof, why would Epstein's aircraft disguise itself as a State Department aircraft that had already been crashed but was still registered? Leased by Dine Corp? Well, for obvious reasons. Avoiding detection or interception, bypassing airspace restrictions, illicit activities, like human trafficking, which Epstein and Dine Corp were both involved in during this time. With Dine Corp being the one who held the lease on this State Department registration Epstein was using. Well, why do I think Epstein was spoofing this government registration rather than this being the actual Dine Corp State Department aircraft? Well, as I said, this aircraft was already crashed 2 years prior. During a narcotics mission in Colombia, actually. And one interesting thing to note is that this make and model, 206L3, it was an aircraft that was not tied to this registration, as I previously said. And second, it's because this flight was in 2002, and the official State Department aircraft tied to this registration actually crashed in the year 2000 in the Colombian jungle on one of Dine Corp's narcotics missions. And this is that crash report from the Service of Flight Safety, from the Aviation Safety Network, from the year 2000. Except this registration was on Epstein's manifest in 2002. It gets much, much deeper. So, this DynCorp State Department aircraft allegedly crashed on the 6th of February 2000. Now you can see the tail number, N474AW. This is the official crash report from the Aviation Safety Network, and there's something interesting about this aircraft. This N number, or tail number, or registration number has been changed multiple times. It's been changed multiple times. 30599, the MSN number, 30599, and 155488. But there's also a lot of other things that have been changed about this report. As you guys can see at the bottom. The time, the narrative, the type of plane, the operator, where the plane left from before it crashed. A lot of things have been changed on this report over the years. So I did some digging for the old reports. And the serial number was changed on this aircraft. It was 30599 before the crash, but then after it was destroyed, it was changed to 155488. You guys can see here. The State Department changed the serial number of the aircraft after it crashed and was destroyed. Now, why would they do this? Well, the updated 155488 is a military serial number. Assigned by the U.S. Navy Bureau. So regardless of which serial number came first or what was after or what serial number this aircraft had, it's associated with the U.S. State Department and the U.S. military, regardless. And it's on Epstein's flight log. That's the point I'm making here. U.S. military, U.S. State Department, on Epstein's passenger manifest, his flight manifest. Here's another website going over everything that happened to this vehicle that was on Epstein's pilot manifest, his flight manifest. It was painted, and shows that the registration was canceled in 2010. After it crashed in the jungle. So it crashed in the jungle in year 2000. It wasn't deregistered until 2010. And Epstein used this registration in 2002. And as you guys are going to see, this wasn't just a typo on Epstein's flight manifest. This was actually registered by the FAA, as you guys are going to see. A lot of people might brush this off as being, well, might just be a typo. This is just the pilot writing it wrong. But no, this was actually registered as an official flight in 2002 by the FAA, 2 years after it was supposedly crashed. Just more information about the flight and the crash. And I went back into the Wayback Machine. This is the flight. And the pilot, his name has been redacted for security reasons, so we don't know who was flying the flight when it crashed. And this aircraft was allegedly just destroyed before it popped back up on Epstein's ranch. I'll leave all the links to everything. There you can see the pilot whose name had been withheld for security reasons. And I went back, but they actually did report this as being destroyed back in 2000. I found this report all the way back in 2000, in April of 2000. So whenever they reported it, it actually was, did happen. So let's see what else we got here. So, how can an aircraft spoof the information of another aircraft? How does that work? Well, we're going to get into that too. Especially if the aircraft is crashed, but still registered, like the State Department vehicle. Here's a pilot's forum of them talking about exactly this subject. How does this happen if a vehicle's been destroyed? And it says here that logbooks and data plates from a totaled aircraft are sold every day. Tail numbers are reused all the time. This is just like a normal practice where you can just roll over the registration, roll over the tail number of an aircraft that's been crashed, excuse me. And here's an article discussing how the CIA uses small aviation companies to transport people around the world. And how's about that? This article mentions Dine Corp, who, quote, worked for the CIA, end quote. Epstein had a small aviation company, Hyperion Air Inc., and Epstein's pilot flew for Epstein in an aircraft leased to Dine Corp, registered by the State Department of U.S. military. Was this Epstein flight a rendition trip? I don't know. Maybe Epstein's other pilots should probably be subpoenaed too. Like Nadia Marcinkovich, rather than just two of them. Epstein's Hyperion Air was registered in the Virgin Islands, so disclosure is slim to none, but this is a State Department and military aircraft on Epstein's flight manifest, leaving his Zorro Ranch, documented as being involved in trafficking, leased to a U.S. military contractor having worked for the CIA. There's plenty of questions that can still be answered without needing to ask the Virgin Islands anything. And here's another article tying DynCorp to mismatched information during military contracts. This time with cage codes. So cage codes are used by the government and military to identify a contractor's location along with tracking their contracts and performance. So DynCorp mismatching their cage codes, their cage codes could just be multiple mistakes, or it could be a form of spoofing, so to speak, similar to their rendition flights with the CIA. Check. Hold on 1 second, guys. Give me just 1 second. I'll be right back. Alright, so we're having some technical difficulties there, but these rendition flights and reporting by the Washington Post on DynCorp's connection to the CIA is the direct intelligence connection to Epstein through the military aircraft flying out of Epstein's private airstrip at his Zorro Ranch. Honestly, smoking gun. There you have it. You heard it here. Epstein's CIA connection. Trying to fix this. This is so annoying. I know you guys are seeing like half the page, and I know that this is probably not a big deal for you guys to, but it's triggering my OCD how this is just only taking up half the screen. I'm so sorry. We're just gonna move on. This is one of those things about live streams that I'm still not really too adept with. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and move on. So when people tell you, you know, there's no Epstein connection, there's no U.S. State Department and military connection to Epstein, that's just a typo, and that plane crashed back in 2000. So there's no way that transponder was being used by any aircraft, let alone Epstein's aircraft. Well, it's not just a typo. The FAA has it registered as an official flight, which means the FAA was picking up the transponder data of a military plane leaving Epstein's private airstrip. A military plane that was supposed to have crashed 2 years earlier in 2000. A military aircraft leased by Dine Corp, a CIA contractor. And this was disclosed about this Epstein flight without anyone really noticing until now. The FAA gave all of its flight records to the Wall Street Journal back in 2011 because the publication was building a flight tracker database. And this was completely unrelated to Epstein. But within this data was all of the flights documented by the FAA on Epstein. And with this official information by the FAA given to the Wall Street Journal, Business Insider actually combed through all of it and created a searchable database of all Epstein's flights. And like we went over earlier, looky here. When you search a database for this military aircraft tail number, it pops right up. Going from Epstein's Zorro Ranch to an airport in Albuquerque. So, Epstein's flight manifest isn't a typo. It is official through information through the FAA. And just to round this out, here's that tail number of the Lolita Express, N909JE, right above this military aircraft leaving Epstein's private airstrip at the Zorro Ranch, associated on record with human trafficking. Don't forget to check out the bookstore. Running deals offering free shipping. And there's a little something in there for everyone. Mind control experiments, eugenics, artificial intelligence, psyops. So make sure to grab one for your collection. And definitely tune into my periodical over on Medium. It's completely free, no paywall. You're more than welcome to stop by at any time. I'll leave all the links to everything down below. Your interest in these topics, it really means a lot.